You ever feel like there's some huge, really important issue in the news? Something that could actually change things for you? Figuring it out feels, I don't know, just impossible. Like putting together flat pack furniture with no instructions.
Yeah, totally. Information overload.
Well, today, consider this your illustrated guide.
Mm,
We're doing a deep dive into the U.S. national debt and the dollar's big role around the world.
exactly. You hear about trillions of dollars, credit downgrades. It sounds so abstract, right?
Yeah.
But it's not just numbers. These things have real consequences. Our mission today is basically to cut through that noise.
Give you the essentials, make sense of it.
Yep. So you understand what's going on and, importantly, why it matters to you.
Okay, so our source material for this is an essay called U.S. Debt and the Dollar's Global Status. We've gone through it, pulled out the key stuff. Think of us as your guides trying to map out the current situation and maybe where the dollar's headed.
Let's dive in.
Right. So a big thing recently was the U.S. credit rating getting downgraded again. What exactly happened there, and why should we, care?
Well, Moody's, they're one of the big rating agencies. They lowered the U.S. rating, went from the top grade Aroa down one notch to AA1. That was projected for 2025.
Okay, just one notch, but still.
But it wasn't the first time. Fitch did something similar in 2023, and S&P, another big one. They actually downgraded the U.S. way back in 2011.
So this isn't exactly new territory. What's the common reason they give?
The main thing, the big flashing light for all of them, is the size of the U.S. national debt. We're talking, what, $36 trillion now? A staggering amount.
And it's not just the amount itself, is it? It's that the government keeps spending more than it brings in. That gap.
That's a huge part of it. The essay really hammers this point, the concern about these ongoing deficits. And the interest payments on that massive debt, they're ballooning.
How much are we talking?
Well, the number cited for 2024 was $881 billion, just in interest. And they project it could hit like $1.8 trillion a year by 2035.
Wow. Okay, so back to the downgrade itself. What does it actually mean for the U.S. when its credit rating goes down?
Think about your own credit score. If it drops, getting a loan costs you more, right? Lenders see more risk.
Okay, yeah, makes sense.
Same idea for a country. A lower rating tells investors, hey, there might be a bit more risk here. So those investors demand a higher return for lending the U.S. money. That means higher interest rates on U.S. Treasury bonds.
And treasuries.
Mm-hmm.
They're usually seen as the safest investment on the planet, aren't they? Sort of the gold standard.
Traditionally, yes, the bedrock. So when trust in that safety starts to wobble even a little,
What happens then?
well, it gets interesting. If investors get nervous, maybe they buy fewer treasuries. Less demand could push interest rates up even more. It can become this negative cycle.
A vicious cycle.
Exactly. And higher interest payments mean less money for everything else the government does. Roads, schools, you name it.
Right, but the U.S. has this kind of superpower, doesn't it? Because the dollar is the world's main currency. We can just print more dollars to pay debts. That's a huge advantage, surely.
It is a huge advantage, a unique position. But the essay calls it a double-edged sword. The Federal Reserve, the U.S. central bank, controls this. You could sort of picture it as a magic money machine in very simple terms.
Sounds great. Need money, print money, but there's
Yeah.
always a but, isn't there? We saw the downside during the pandemic, right? With the stimulus check.
We certainly did. Lots of new dollars were created very quickly to fund that relief, which was needed at the time, obviously.
But the consequence was,
Inflation, big time. As the essay notes, we all felt it. Prices for groceries, gas, everything just shot up. It hit your wallet directly.
yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
And the underlying danger, the big risk, is that if you print too much money, the value of each dollar goes down. It's like watering down juice, maybe.
Good analogy. The more you print, the less each dollar is worth. And if that happens too much, other countries might start thinking, maybe we should use a different currency for trade or hold our reserves in something else.
And that would threaten the dollar's top spot globally.
Absolutely. Which brings us back to that debt number. Just how big is $36 trillion? Why is it such a worry?
It's almost impossible to really grasp the scale. The essay puts it at $36.2 trillion currently. And get this, that's about 122% of the entire U.S. economy's output for a year. 122% of GDP.
More than everything we produce in a year.
And the speed it's grown is alarming, too. It apparently doubled in just 15 years. And the projection could hit $50 trillion by 2033.
50 trillion. Wow. What's pushing it up so fast?
Well, the essay points to big things like Social Security and Medicare. Huge costs, like $2.3 trillion just for those two in June 2023. Then you add in tax cuts, other spending. It leads to these massive annual deficits over $1 trillion year after year.
And the projection for those cumulative deficits by 2035 is?
Something like $21.8 trillion more added to the debt by then. It paints a really concerning picture.
And the dangers. The essay talks about how this massive debt can actually slow down economic growth.
How does that work?
Because more and more money has to go just to pay the interest, like we talked about. Money that could otherwise be invested in things that actually grow the economy, technology, infrastructure, education. The essay suggests it could shave off maybe 0.1% of growth each year.
Doesn't sound like much, but it adds up over time.
It does. And the scarier part, maybe, is the risk of a real crisis. If investors really lose faith and start demanding much higher interest rates.
Then the government might struggle to borrow, right? Especially in an emergency or a recession.
Exactly. It could severely limit the ability to respond. The essay uses pretty strong language here, calls the debt like a bomb waiting to explode.
Yikes. Okay, that definitely grabs your attention.
Yeah.
But it's not just about the U.S. internally, is it? The essay talks about how other currencies like the euro and the British pound seem to be gaining strength compared to the dollar. Why is that happening?
The essay gives 5 main reasons. First off, debt levels elsewhere. Some major economies, like Germany, for instance, have much lower debt compared to their economy size. Around 70% debt to GDP for Germany versus our 122%.
So, less debt equals more trust from investors. Makes sense.
Right. Second, stable policies. The European Central Bank and the Bank of England, they've generally been seen as more cautious about, well, printing money and running huge deficits, more predictable.
Okay. Stability builds confidence. Number 3.
Interest rates. Often, central banks in Europe and the UK raised their interest rates faster than the US Fed did to fight inflation. So their government bonds started offering better returns.
So investors just chase the better yield? Simple enough. What's for?
Diversification. Some big countries, like China, are actively trying to hold fewer dollars. They want to spread their risk, maybe for strategic reasons too, so they've been buying more euros and pounds.
Okay. And the 5th reason? Geopolitical trust. That sounds complicated.
It is a bit nuanced. The idea in the essay is that when the U.S. uses things like economic sanctions, it can make some countries nervous about relying too heavily on the dollar. They might see the euro or pound as maybe less tied to one country's foreign policy decisions.
They might prefer those currencies, which helps boost their value.
Exactly. It's a subtle shift, but it contributes.
And the essay actually put some numbers on this shifts, right? The dollar's share of global reserves.
Yeah, it's dropped. It was around 70% back in 1999. Now it's about 58%. Still the biggest by far, but lower.
And the euro.
The euro share has climbed to about 20%. The pound and the Japanese yen have also seen some gains.
So definitely a trend, even if the dollar's still dominant.
Oh, absolutely. Still dominant. Used in like 90% of global trade, still holds that 58% of reserves. That gives the U.S. huge advantages, cheaper borrowing, the power of sanctions we mentioned. But the essay warns about 3 big threats that could speed up this erosion.
Okay, let's break down those threats. Threat number 1, I'm guessing, is the debt again.
You guessed it. That huge $36 trillion debt, it just makes investors increasingly question if the U.S. can actually handle its obligations long term. The essay actually mentions Fitch, specifically warning this could hurt the dollar's status.
And raises the risk of a debt crisis, maybe even a dollar crash.
That's the nightmare scenario, yes. A sharp, sudden loss of value. Threat number 2.
Let me guess. Politics.
Bingo. Political fights. Especially those standoffs over the debt ceiling. They just create massive uncertainty for global investors. Remember 2011. That fight cost the U.S. an extra $1.3 billion in borrowing costs, according to the essay.
And we've had similar scares more recently in 2023 and looming again in 2025.
Exactly. It makes everyone nervous. And an actual default. I mean, the U.S. failing to pay its bills, the consequences could be catastrophic. Global recession territory.
So gridlock here directly impacts the dollar's standing worldwide. Okay, threat number 3.
Rising competitors. We talked about the euro and pound, but the essay also flags the Chinese yuan gaining influence and the whole new world of digital currencies emerging as potential alternatives.
Right, so new options are appearing.
And the core point is, if trust in the dollar keeps eroding because of the debt or the politics, people might move to these alternatives much faster than they otherwise would, and that would really diminish the dollar's global power.
Okay, so we've laid out the problems, the risks. What does the essay say the U.S. needs to do about it? What's the path back to stability, or at least maintaining the dollar's strength?
It lays out 4 main things, and they're all kind of linked. First, and maybe toughest, cut government spending. That means hard choices, probably including looking at big programs like Social Security and Medicare to get those deficits down.
Politically difficult for sure. What's number 2?
Boost economic growth. A stronger economy brings in more tax revenue, which helps with the deficit. The essay suggests things like smart tax reforms or cutting red tape could help drive that growth.
Right, grow the pie so the debt is a smaller slice.
Third,
Fix the politics. Specifically, end these damaging fights over the debt ceiling. Create some stability and predictability so investors regain confidence in U.S. bonds and the U.S. system.
stop shooting ourselves in the foot, basically.
Pretty much. And the 4th step.
Let me see. Controlling the money printing. You got it. The Federal Reserve needs to be really careful managing the money supply. Avoid fueling more inflation, which, as we said, weakens the dollar's value.
So it's a mix. Cut spending, boost growth, fix the political fights, and be careful with the printing press.
That's the recipe the essay puts forward. It argues these steps are pretty essential to protect the dollar's position and, crucially, avoid a potential crisis down the road.
Not easy fixes, any of them.
No, definitely requires serious, sustained effort.
Okay, let's try and wrap this up. Key takeaways from our deep dive into this essay. The credit downgrades. They're like warning flares. That $36 trillion debt, it's a massive, complex problem with real dangers.
Right, and printing money isn't a free lunch. It comes with the risk of inflation and devaluing the dollar. Plus, other currencies are becoming more competitive. We see that in the reserve numbers.
And why does this matter to you listening right now? Because these big, abstract things, they connect directly to the prices you pay, the strength of your savings, the stability of the whole financial system we all rely on.
Exactly. Understanding this stuff isn't just for economists anymore. It's becoming pretty essential for everyone.
Absolutely. So here's a final thought to chew on as we finish up. Based on everything we've discussed today, the debt trajectory, the pressure on the dollar, the rise of alternatives, what do you think the global financial world might actually look like, say, 10 years from now?
Yeah, and maybe even more interesting, what unexpected things, a new technology, a major geopolitical event, something totally out of left field could completely change the game and either speed up these trends or maybe reverse them.
Definitely something to ponder.